I'd like to start by thanking you all for taking the time to come here to hear this new stewardship resource, a narrative of generosity following Jesus into stewardship. This is actually my 13th or 14th of these road shows, and the actual things that I say have changed a little bit as we've gone out and we've spoken to people, but this is my last one, and I can head home tonight to Inverness and then move down to Edinburgh tomorrow. So no rest yet. So my name is David Lynch. I'm the National Stewardship Coordinator. We have 4 stewardship consultants. We have Ashley Johnston, who's just sat there, Fiona Penny at the back, Margot Robertson, who was downstairs, and Pauline Wilson, who's not with us this evening. We are in St Andrews tomorrow night, so if you really enjoy it, you can go again, because they are free. But let me just open with a word of prayer. Gracious Father, we do thank you that you've brought us here tonight. Father, we ask that you help us understand this great biblical theme of stewardship. And Father, we ask you to watch and guide over us and during this evening and during the questions and the teas and coffees afterwards. In Jesus' name, amen. So, the purpose and format of the roadshow is to give you an understanding of the wider context of stewardship. And what I mean by that is we normally think of stewardship in the terms of time, talents, and money. And we're trying to expand it beyond those three, and we're using story, and I'll talk about the role and use of story in how we put across that narrative of generosity, and where the role and use of story features not only just in the church but in our own lives as stewards. And then at the end, we'll go downstairs, we'll have a cup of tea and coffee, we'll gain some feedback, and all that feedback is used. And then at some point within the next week, if you've signed up on the email list, you'll get a copy of the slides and some kind of report about the feedback. But let's start with stewardship and understanding that wider context of stewardship, and where do we find stewardship in our faith story? Where does it begin? When I came into this role 8 or 9 months ago, I got the privilege of going down to London to a huge, big stewardship conference, and I've been to other conferences, I've read books, I've read articles, I've looked on websites about stewardship. And if you knew nothing about stewardship, you would imagine that stewardship began in a bank or in an accounts office, because it seems to always focus on money, which obviously is an important thing, but it always focuses on money. So we said, okay, well, where does stewardship begin? And it was quite clear to us that stewardship began in the garden narrative, in the Genesis story, when God speaks to the newly created humanity, to the man and woman, and he provides them this great abundant earth and starts telling them how to look after it. What he doesn't do is give them a command that says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful, increase your offering, fill your bank accounts, and have dominion over gift aid, and over every rolling coin that moves below the pews. We know what he said. He said, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves upon the ground. So God brings the new humanity into this abundant garden where they would have everything that they would ever need. And he tells them to look after it. That's the first thing he tells mankind to do, to look after it. So stewardship emerges in a place of complete abundance, bathed in the generosity of God. God, in his generous outpouring with this bountiful abundance, places the man and woman in the garden. And biblical stewardship, in a very simple form, because we don't have a whole day to run through this, but in a very simple form, it's to nurture. It is to take care of. It is to steward all that we have been given. It's as simple as that, to nurture, to take care, to look after, to steward. So stewardship, therefore, emerges not from a desert of scarcity, because often we can think of ourselves in terms of scarcity, we can think of the church in terms of scarcity, but from a garden of abundance. Stewardship emerges in this garden of abundance. So let me talk about the use of story in the narrative of generosity. Our lives are stories. The stories of our church is a story. The Bible is stories. The whole of society, everything we consume through the media, through everything, it's built upon stories. Stories are what drives our world. So why use story? How can story help us as stewards? Well, stories inform and direct us. They guide our world, they build up, and they tear down. Stories shape how we understand our world. Stories shape how we understand our church. Stories give us a place and a presence, and stories give us context. When we know our stories, we have the ability to change them. But not all stories are reliable. Take this story, for instance. US Republican Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez opposes daylight saving time because the extra hour of sunlight drastically speeds up climate change. These are stories that were posted on the internet and went viral all around the world. People believed these. Just like saying sniffing rosemary improves memory by 75%. It's not true. I can't remember if it's true. I've obviously not sniffed enough lately. Or this one. A man from Waterbury in Connecticut faces divorce after his wife found out that he was not actually deaf and had been faking it for more than 62 years to avoid having to listen to her. That's a story, not an inspiration to aim for. A Dutch woman lives for 14 years without eating or drinking. I put that one in there because we often think fake news is something that just happens now. That was written in an English pamphlet in 1611 for the sole purpose of selling that pamphlet. Fake news has been around for a long, long time, even in the garden, I suppose. You'll all be familiar with TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor has 435 million reviews, of which at least 4 of them are mine. That is 435 million narratives or little stories that people tell based on their experiences, based on how they feel about something, on an adventure, on a restaurant they've been to. 435 million stories. Our world is awash with story. And I have selected, for your entertainment tonight, a couple of those stories from TripAdvisor to show you how people can have a perception that can influence, how their stories can change things. So start with this one. We always book our hotel based on the lowest price available, but we still expect high quality. This is genuinely what someone wrote on TripAdvisor. So we felt cheated when we opened the door to discover a dirty and dangerous room. The shower was filthy, the carpet not vacuumed, and various stains adorned the room, as well as plugs poorly wired. We are not ones to complain, so we went out, spent a small fortune on cleaning products, and spent the evening thoroughly cleaning. My husband even rewired the plugs. Do not stay here. The very next person wrote this. Can you tell me which room number you were in? I'm booking that room. Or this one. My husband and I had never been to Italy. This was our first time. And we both wanted to experience a genuine, authentic Italian experience. We booked a hotel in Rome and arrived mid-afternoon, ready to enjoy our authentic Italian experience. So imagine our disappointment when we discovered that the staff only spoke Italian. So in the hotel story and in the Italian experience story, the perceptions and expectations were influenced negatively by the storyteller. In one, they booked a 1-star hotel, but expected a 5-star hotel. In the other, they wanted authentic, but only on their terms. What then is our story? What is the story of the church today? So as I've been in this role for 9 months, I've had the privilege and honour of going around many churches all over Scotland. And it's been a great experience just to hear people's stories, just to hear what's going on out there. And the amazing thing is there's common stories and there's distinctive stories for each church. But there are 2 stories which I seem to hear elements of more than any other. The first one goes like this. We are a church in decline. There's not enough ministers. We are totally irrelevant. There's no young people and there is no money. And then another story says we are a church that is exploring new methods of ministry, exploring new streams of income, exploring youth engagement, willing to embrace change, willing to examine ourselves, active in communities, exploring new paths. We are relevant and we are growing. So how does that work then? That we have 2 different stories from one source. Which one is true? And it could be argued in some places that both are true, or that each one at least contains elements of truth. But what is important is which one we choose to believe. And this is the reason why, and this is why we're using story. Because the story we believe determines the direction of the journey we take. The stories we believe determine the direction of the journey we take. So let me tell you my story, or a little bit of my story. When I was at school, I had the most awful stammer. It was so hard for me at school. The teachers did their very best to cure me by making me stand at the front of the class and read out to the class endlessly, which was shocking and actually made you not want to go to school on those days. Actually, I didn't go to school on those days when we had reading. And then I became a teenager, and then I joined the Navy. I could never speak to girls. I struggled in the Navy with the commands I had to give because of this fear of stammering. And it just got worse and worse through my 20s, into my 30s, into my early 40s, I'd say. The stammer just gripped me completely. And I had this story, and my story said, if I didn't have this stammer, I would have been this. If I didn't have this stammer, I would have achieved this, this, and this by now. It's this stammer that is holding me back, that's kept me back all my life. And then through a couple of experiences, that story began to change. And I came to the point where I said, I am the person I am because of the stammer I have. I am the person who has learned to listen because I never spoke. I am the person who learned empathy because I was the person on the other end of empathy. But I changed my story to say, this is part of me. This stammer is part of me. And it's still there now and again. And it's okay. It's an old friend. I don't mind it. But you see, it was changing the story that determined the direction of my journey. One story paralyzed me, one story empowered me. So do we believe a negative story and become paralyzed, or do we believe a positive story and become empowered? So that brings me to the narrative of generosity, following Jesus into stewardship, picking up that following Jesus theme. So how does it work? Well, the narrative of generosity is a modular-based resource. That means it's split into sections. It's not just time, talents, and money. It's split into sections so it can be done continually, if that's what you choose. It teaches and reflects the great biblical theme of stewardship, and it uses stories to motivate and enthuse. Not our stories, your stories. As you enter into it and start telling your stories, those stories will motivate and enthuse and create the ability to change. The narrative of generosity can be tailored to suit all expressions of church. And this was really key to me early on. I came into the role and we needed something new, and I thought, how do you write something that fits all 1,300 Church of Scotland congregations? I didn't want to go externally and buy a resource and say, this is what we'll use, a one size fits all. Because how can one size fit all when we are so different, not just as churches, but as people as well? I've never been to a single church that is the same. And there's a reason why it's not the same, because it has different people in it with different stories and different experiences. So the narrative can be tailored to suit every single church. And we've split stewardship into 12 key themes: God stories, time stories, gift, money, volunteer, relationship, youth, possession, mind, body stories, earth stories, and vision stories. And I'll explain a few of those stories as we move on. But that gives us a much wider platform to be good stewards from, rather than just time, talents, and money, even though those are all inherently and quite clearly still in there. So how will it work? And this is a tricky bit, because I can't fully explain how it will work, because I don't know your stories yet. But when we know your stories, you'll see how it works. But in essence, there'll be a time to tell your stories around those themes, that time of listening and speaking, because hearing your stories will enable us to fully resource you and support you. And I'll probably mention now, one of the important things for us as a stewardship team is to be good stewards of all the resources within the church. So if you were doing an earth story, we could connect you with Eco Church if you're not already there. It's about using us being good stewards internally as well. And then there's a time to reflect on those stories. Maybe some of it will be a tearing down process, maybe some of it will build up. And then there'll be a time to act with outcomes and feedback, to do something achievable, to set ourselves goals which are achievable, because there's something great happens when you achieve something. It gives you the confidence and the encouragement to move on to something else. I'm going to skip that one for now. So we often don't think about volunteering and stewardship. But as you'll see there, we believe God has blessed the church with a myriad of precious volunteers. We partner with God as we are led in supporting the people who freely give their gifts, their bodies and their time, celebrating and encouraging them in their acts of service and in nurturing and developing our volunteers with compassion. Each of the stories has these three parts to it. So the first part is a belief statement. We believe that God has blessed the church. The second part is a commitment from us as stewards to say we partner with God as we are led. And the third bit is an affirmation for God's mission, for God's glory. Because that's why we're here, for God's mission and for God's glory. So let me picture a hypothetical situation. We all have volunteers in our churches. We are all volunteers in some form in our churches. And I don't know how many volunteers you have in your church. I know there's some churches have 5 or 10. I'm including session clerks and treasurers and stewardship conveners and safeguarding coordinators, all voluntary roles. So imagine we counted up all the volunteers. Imagine some crazy person came into power in the UK and said, right, from now on, you've got to pay for your volunteers. You've got to pay your volunteers. It's not free anymore. You've got to pay them the national minimum wage. So I thought, I wonder what it would cost us as a church to cover the wage bill of roughly an average number of volunteers within the Church of Scotland. And I came to a figure of 63.5 million if we had to pay for what all the volunteers do in our churches. Thankfully we don't, because people offer their lives as gifts of service. But 63.5 million. There are not many organisations that I'm aware of that receive this kind of selfless giving of time to further the work of that organisation or body. So you could build stories around your volunteers, and one of the outcomes could be, and I'm sure some of you already do this, but you could have a volunteer celebration day, just a day, where you do nothing but celebrate the wonderful work and the wonderful service they give. We could even, I don't know if we do, we could have a national volunteer day to celebrate those volunteers, of which I'm one, in the church. So we can be good stewards of our volunteers. Possession stories, probably another area that we don't really relate with as stewardship. And yet Jesus seems to relate to it quite a bit about our possessions. We believe God has blessed the church with a bounty of useful stuff. We just used the word stuff because we couldn't think of a all-encompassing word that was better than stuff. And we partner with God as we are led in using the things we have for growth, for recognizing when those things become of no use, and helping us to let go to make space for new. It kind of centers around those things that become of no use. You know, the things that become of no use and then you put them in the loft for the next 25 years and never look at them again? That kind of thing. So I've got a couple of stories around possessions. Minimalism, mission praise, and marquees. Minimalism, because I live a minimalist life, so I don't have very much, and we're moving down to Edinburgh, like I said, late tomorrow, and we'll be able to fit our whole household into a transit van, including all the people as well, because they can sit in the front. So our whole house will be contained in a white van. There is something so liberating about having less. You don't have to carry around with you. Now, I'm not encouraging you to all go home and empty your lofts or your garages or whatever, but I do want to talk about two experiences that I've encountered. So I was called to a church some years back because I had experience in buying and selling things online. And they asked me for some advice. They said, we've got this room in the church. I think lots of churches have these kind of rooms. And yet it's full of stuff that we actually don't kind of want anymore. Well, we don't think we want it. And we've got a community group who wants to rent this room, so that would be an income. Well, we wonder if you could help us value any of the stuff in there. So we opened the door, and it was just full of hymn books. Just a room full of hymn books, some dating back to the 1920s. Just in case anyone from the 1920s turned up at church, they'd have a handy hymn book for them. But there was every single version of Mission Praise you can imagine. The blue ones, the orange ones, the combined ones. They had lots of songs of fellowship. But this room was just full of hymn books. And you could see where they'd changed from one hymn book to another because they were all stacked up. All the red books were there, all the green books were there. So someone must have bought them in on that day they changed them. And I said, why have you not cleared them? Oh, because they were a gift. They were a gift off someone 50 years ago. We don't know what to do with them. So I said, well, I don't think your mission praise and your songs of fellowship are going to sell. But you really need to get rid of these. So let's go through them. So as we went through them, we started throwing some out. And as we were going through them, they were telling their stories around these hymn books, and that became a bit easier to let them go. And we eventually got further and further through the room, and we found a box at the back, and it was a dusty cardboard box, and I opened that one. I said, oh, this looks interesting. There might be some interesting ones in here. Nobody knew about this box. It had been in there for decades. So I went through them, and I pulled one hymn book out, and it was John Newton's Olney Hymns from the Olney Church, an original version. So we popped that on eBay, and someone in America paid £5,000 for it. So not only did they have a value in those possessions, but they could then actually rent out the room. And the marquee story is similar. Again, another church who had another room, and it was full of these massive big canvas marquees that were probably like 20, 30 meters in length, about 10 meters high. They had the massive big wooden poles with the spikes on. And I said, you've got about 8 of these. What are these for? The Boys Brigade. I said, really? 8 of these huge tents? Yeah, in case we take them camping, but we're actually not allowed to use them anymore. The council have said that we're not allowed to use these because of some health and safety rule. They only had 2 boys in Boys Brigade, so that would have been a lot of tent space for 2 boys. And I said, these will sell, or you can give them away for something. And I said, why are you keeping them anyway if you can't use them? And they said, because it reminds us of those wonderful halcyon summer days when buses used to pull up outside the church and 200 Boys Brigaders would come pouring out of the church, climb on these buses, we'd pack the canvas tents on and all the cooking stuff, and we'd take them away and we'd go camping for a week. And then we'd bring it all back, tie it up again, and put it in the cupboard. And my minimalist leaning softened for a moment. I thought, oh, that's a nice story. I can understand. Why they want to keep those. That's fair enough. But then I caught leave of my senses. And I said, have you not thought, and we had a cup of tea and we shared stories. I said, have you not thought about what this does to you? And they said, it reminds us of those good times. But the door was always closed to that room because it also reminded them of where they were now. And there was an inherent emotion tied up in every single one of those canvas tents that made them feel sad, that made them feel guilty, that made them feel so distraught that those times had gone. Sometimes those possessions can contain inherent value. Often they do. And that is why we need to be good stewards of our possessions. So an outcome could be, you could go around your church, you could have a look, you could give away, or you could sell what you no longer need. But the key thing is, it's about creating that space of letting that old thing go to bring new things in. I often find that because I don't have a huge wardrobe of clothes, because if I get something normally has to go, that when you create that space for new, then new appears. Youth stories. And this is a difficult one because there could be so many ways in which we steward our young people. We believe God has always blessed the church with young people, and we partner with God as we are led in supporting young people on their life journey, in upholding them in a rapidly changing world and caring for them as they face the pressures of contemporary culture. And believe me, they do face huge pressures. Pressures like looking around here that most of us never faced as young people. So how could we be good stewards? Well, you could tell your stories about the young people. And one of the stories I often hear is that we believe young people are the future of the church. And I think that's a huge strain to put on young people anyway. And young people are part of the church now. But if we take that as it is, we believe that young people are the future of the church, then if we're good stewards of that, and if we intend to be good stewards of young people, then we have to ask how many young people make key future decisions in our congregations, councils, and committees. You know, I see many young people throughout the world leading huge movements, being innovative entrepreneurs, changing our world. But they're not changing our world, are they? They're changing their world for the future. And I just wonder if one interesting outcome would be to ask the young people to create a future plan for your church. Wouldn't that be interesting? Because they would be looking at it from this position, not from that position, looking back. That could be one good way, or that could be a way of being good stewards of young people. I think they might come up with an amazing plan. Their plan might be better than our plan. We might go with their plan in the end. But often we plan for a church, or we plan for a government. We plan in society for short term, and yet young people have a vested interest in planning for 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead. Money stories. So we do get onto money. And we partner with God as we are led in using our money wisely, both in our giving and investing it ethically for growth, as a reflection of the generosity shown to us. And that's a statistic from the Church of England. 45% of givers are aged 72 or over. Some congregations have a higher percentage. So I was a member of a church where I would have to say that it was probably 90 to 95% of the givers, the regular givers in that church, were aged 72 or over. If you were in a business, you would look at that and alarm bells would start ringing, knowing that time keeps on moving forward. So, we do face a bit of a dilemma. Our main source of income is traditional giving via the members of the church. But if we believe that statistic, that most of our givers are 72 or over and are probably on a pension, the likelihood is their pension may not increase with the rate of inflation. The cost of living increases. So you can't build a 5, 10, 15, 20-year plan based on those people who are currently giving more. There's only so much some people can give. So we as a stewardship team would always encourage congregations to give generously. But we also want to begin the process of encouraging churches to look to increase additional income to supplement any possible decrease. How do we bring money in other than just through the plate or the offering? And I've not got any any specific answers, but I know I've been to churches, and when you hear their story, you can say, oh, there's some funding that you could apply for that, or you could do this. So I bought, you would have seen these at some point over the last month or two. These are contactless giving systems. I'm not a sales rep for this company, but I'm just saying, or I'm going to say, put that one down, that's heavy, this one's not. So this, you'll all recognize the symbol on it. So the key thing to note here is this is not for regular givers in the church. This is for looking at new ways. So maybe you have an event, maybe you have a music event, maybe you have a baptism or a wedding, and people want to give. Now, if you're bringing young people into the church, or me, I don't carry cash. If you bring me into your church and I forgot to go to the cash point to take out however much so you can put it back in the bank on Monday, then I won't be able to give you anything. And that's not I mean, sometimes you want to give, and there's just not the opportunity. So this is for those purposes. And I'll preempt some of the questions by saying this has a built-in SIM card. So if you don't have a phone signal and people still tap it, it stores it, and then when you get in range of a phone signal, it all uploads to wherever it goes. So I think these are vital to have. I think churches shouldn't look at them as a way of getting extra money out of the people who are already in church. They should be looked at as a way of bringing in additional income. This one is pretty much the same as that one. It just has the same inner bit, but in a different form. So that's just the unit, and it has a card entry system in there as well. And you can set the donations, and people can swipe them higher or lower. Very simple to use. So we do need to look to increase additional income to supplement any possible decrease. We could also, we have access to tools which can help you conduct a financial review. It may not be, how do we get more money in? It might be, how do we save money? Is this something that we can save money on? So what I'm going to do now is we're going to read through the rest of the stories.
God's stories. We believe that God, through Jesus Christ, has entered into relationship with humanity, inviting and entrusting us as part of God's family to be good stewards. We commit to nurturing our relationship with God, finding time to enjoy God, and living out the generous responsibility given to us. Time stories. We believe that our time on earth is given by God for a period that has been ordained. We partner with God as we are led to using our time wisely to benefit our families, our friends, and our neighbours, in our homes, in our social connections, and in our communities. Gift stories. We believe that God has blessed us with a diversity of gifts. We partner with God as we are led in being able to exercise those gifts through the use of them and allow safe spaces for people to use their gifts in an affirming surrounding and to share our gifts freely for the growth of the kingdom into which we are invited. Relationship stories. We believe that God created us for relationship with one another. We partner with God as we are led in responding to love one another, growing with each other in joyous connection while developing and sustaining an environment of peace. Mind stories. We believe that God has given us bountiful and creative minds. We partner with God in celebrating this creativity in the works we do. in renewing our minds through meditation and reflection, and in developing our minds through ongoing learning and development. We believe, body stories. We believe that our bodies belong to God. We are all vessels of God's glory. We partner with God as we are led into being careful stewards of our bodies, nourishing them for health, exercising them for well-being, and presenting them as a witness. Vision stories. We believe that God, through Jesus Christ, has set us upon a journey of faith. We commit to developing a mission that acknowledges the past, embraces the present, and reaches expectantly into the future.
So you can see how we've expanded stewardship into more manageable areas. How it will work is, if you've put your name down on the email lists, then in a few days, in a week, you will receive all the slides so that you can review them along with any feedback that we've received. At that point, you can make an inquiry to say, actually, we would like to know more. We would like to explore this. And we will. One of us will come and see you. It's totally non-committal and it's free. And I'm saying it's free because I've had a few people ask me how much a stewardship consultant costs, because there used to be a charge in the past, but there's not now, so it's completely free. Based on us coming and meeting you and hearing your stories, we can work out where we go, which story you might want to embark on, and we'd set an agreed timescale, and we would support you in that journey. This is about us working with you. So we're going to finish in a minute, and this is my last road show. I'm trying to hide the smile because I'm feeling good. I'm not hiding it, I just feel good. But I want to tell you a story, because I think stories are so powerful. So some years ago, I went from Manchester to Helmsdale for a holiday. Strange place to go, I know, but we had some friends living up there. So we went on holiday to Helmsdale, and we were in a charity shop in Golspie. And I came out of the shop, and my friend came out after me, and she said, "I've bought you a book." I thought, "Oh, thank you very much." And she handed me a Billy Graham book. And I went, "Oh, that book's not for me. That's for Rosalind. You need to write her name in it and keep it in your handbag." And she said, "Why did you say that?" And I said, "I actually have no idea why I said that. It just came into my head." So a week later, she's in a Manchester park with other mums from the church, and they sat in a group. And this lady walks over with a young girl and says, "Can I join you?" And they said, "Yes, you can." And they introduced themselves. And my friend said, "And what's your name?" You know what's coming here. She said, "Rosalind." She said, "Well, I've got a book for you, and it's in my bag." And she gave her the book. And that lady, who was going through, I'll not explain in any detail, you can work it out, she was going through some very, very difficult and dark times, and her daughter was going through those dark times with her. She became a good friend of the church. She started coming to church. She stayed with us as a family for some time, and her life journey changed, and she started walking along a different path and telling a different story. The reason I tell you that story is because we have a choice what we believe there. I was either in Golspie, and just out of pure coincidence, I picked a name, a random name that I'd never used before, and asked my friend to write it in the book. Or there was some divine inspiration to put that name in my mind, for her to write in that book, to lead that lady to a place of safety. And I think with the church and with stewardship, it's about what story we want to believe. Because the story we believe will determine the direction of the journey we take.